let's get to, I mean, I watched this press conference in full with the Canadian Armed Forces, and I was like, wow, how many people did we throw out during COVID for not getting the vaccination? Because they held a major press conference yesterday where they basically lowered the health and fitness standards for recruitment for the Canadian Armed Forces. They really do have a crisis of recruitment and retention happening over there. Things that would have previously excluded you from service because, we want our fittest, our strongest, defending the country and our ideals abroad. But that's not the case anymore. Let's take a look at this.
Any and all conditions are on the table for consideration for enrollment. In the past, as I mentioned, there was only those two groups, fit and unfit. And now with this group that's in the middle, fit to the task, we're able to accept folks with a whole host of different conditions. ADHD is a good example, asthma is another, anxiety is another, and the list goes on and on. The important thing to note with all medical conditions, there's a spectrum.
Yeah, I don't know how well people with anxiety are going to be faring when you're
In a war
tasked
zone.
with in a war zone, but these are very stressful, intense, fast-paced, fast-moving jobs. Military standards are there for a reason. They're supposed to serve as this framework that values and upholds the operational aspects of the military. And that is a demanding, high stress job. Someone with anxiety, I would caution, is not going to necessarily be able to uphold these expectations for things, like performance, conduct, equipment maintenance. Maybe you could be assigned there to kind of hang back and hold down the fort in some areas, but gosh, this sounds like a recipe waiting to happen, or a disaster waiting to happen.
Yeah, and you know what, members of the military, past and present, let us know in the comments what you think about this. I'm on the outside looking in, although I did have a young man who's very close to my family go into basic training this year, and I did my best to convince him otherwise, because I thought, give it a year or two, until the Conservatives are in power, till, there's maybe a change in the chain of command, because you have to remember, this is still the chain of command that enforced the COVID restrictions that saw some of the best and brightest of the military forced out. And I think that's the point that I want to make here is there was fit and unfit, right, before. And these are the same people who said, unvaccinated, you are unfit. You were unfit for duty. Now, that may still be the case. Unvaccinated, you're unfit for duty. But someone going in with an anxiety disorder, that's fit for duty. And I realize a lot of people have anxiety disorders, but when you're dealing with anxiety disorders, and now you're going to add on top of that, quite possibly, an operational stress injury like PTSD, I agree with Tamara. This is a recipe for disaster. I know I couldn't go into the military. God love the people who can. And we need those people, but I'm not sure lowering the recruitment standards is the way to go, because we kind of already did that, haven't we? And I just can't see that this is going to make it any better. When you want the best and brightest. And so you have to create a military that attracts them. And I don't think this creates a military that actually attracts them. You have to address to use the Liberals' language, root causes of why strong young men and women are not enrolling in this iteration of the Canadian military. Deal with that. Don't just say, you know what, we're letting everybody in. It's fine. I think this is not a good idea.
Opening the floodgates doesn't matter, whatever. We'll find a spot for you somewhere. So I guess just let's get that threshold very low. But if you contrast that to what President Trump is doing, for instance, with the military, one of his very first executive orders was to reinstate all military members who were ousted during the COVID hysteria when the mandates were implemented for military service members. He not only reinstated every single one of them, but he ordered them full, complete back pay for their suffering over 2+ years that they were prevented from doing their jobs, not because they were, unfit or unwell or had some other issue, but simply because they were upholding their own freedom to make their own medical choice for their bodies. And so I find that really stark again in the way that Canada is approaching some of these issues versus what they're doing in the US, which I would say there's been massive support behind President Trump's decision to do that, to reinstate and issue full back pay. And then look at us here, the weaklings in Canada. We're just going to lower our bar for military service, and we'll find somewhere where you can fit in. And I mean, this is kind of also unsurprising given that the Chief of Defense Staff was responding to questions about Pierre Poilievre, the leader of the Conservative Party, who's very likely going to be our next prime minister. His plans to change military culture from woke to warrior, claiming that she doesn't know what woke means. Here we have this clip.
The federal conservative leader says he'll change the military's culture from woke to warrior culture if he forms government. What do you make of that?
So first of all, I don't know what woke means, but what I can tell you is that for us, the ultimate goal is to build strong teams, and strong teams are built upon the foundation of trust and respect between its members.
Excuse me, ma'am. I can tell by your glasses you know exactly what woke means. But again, Pierre Poilievre is exactly right. That's what I just said. We've got a problem with the culture of the Canadian military, where young, fit Canadians with a sense of civic duty, pride, and patriotism are not choosing the military. What's wrong? But instead of saying, okay, we do have a cultural problem, they are, instead of trying to fix the culture, they're trying to change the culture while denying that's what they're doing. I don't even know what woke means. Okay, lady, you're just under a rock. Give me, absolutely not. Don't lie. Like you could say like, well, I disagree with his assessment that the military is woke, but just to say that you don't even know what the word means, whatever, lady.
Well, and look at, it's right on the National Defense Government of Canada website. The diversity, equity, and inclusion principles of the armed forces, of our national defense strategy. It's right there. Where positive space program. Learn about the positive space, a program which fosters a safe and inclusive work environment, and 2S LGBTQI+ communities. Gender-based analysis, combating systemic racism and racial discrimination in the defense team. I mean, the list here goes on and on of where woke has infiltrated into the Department of National Defense and the Canadian Armed Forces. It's listed right on the website. And if you can't see that and see that those might be deterrents to people who, she says, build strong teams built on trust, a foundation of trust. No, a strong team is, for the military, for our national defense, is built on strength of mind, strength of body, strength of conviction, strength of patriotism. Trust is, I don't think that is really the strong foundation of a team of national defense that you build off of. And I mean, maybe there is a place for, some people with, for instance, autism are amazing with numbers, or have quirky areas or sectors where they excel and are, strong in that sense. But deploying someone to combat, that's where my brain automatically goes. Deploying someone to combat who has an anxiety disorder. I mean, gosh, what are we doing to those poor people who have to try to face something like that, knowing you have a predisposition to something like a panic attack? This just doesn't seem safe. It's like safe and inclusive. It doesn't seem safe or very nice to be inclusive to me at all. It
feels like dividing people up by their gender and race. and I'm remiss to use the word gender because I don't want to use the word gender. Gender's not real. I want to use the word sex, but dividing people up based on sex, sexual preferences, race seems like the opposite of building an effective team, because you're segregating people, you're carving them out of the team by making their differences first and foremost. Again, I'm on the outside looking in, but what I think most people recognize as the military is some place where you want a strong, fit person beside you, because your life depends on them too, and their life depends on you. And if we're just shoehorning people in for the sake of quotas, I'm not sure that's going to work out very well. And, like if this, and I guess we're jumping to conclusions, of course, based on what we know of the federal government, that this will be lowered combat readiness standards. But if we're talking about what the IDF does, I think I'm kind of all for that. So the IDF, because there's mandatory military service in Israel, they find ways to actually be inclusive. So if you are somebody with a developmental disorder or a mental illness, they find a place where you can work within the military to meet your mandatory military requirements. If that's what we're talking about, okay, that's actual real inclusivity. But if we're talking about just putting people into positions of combat or deployment readiness to meet some sort of arbitrary DEI quotas, this is a dangerous, dangerous proposition.
Yeah, especially when you consider something like asthma, where, if you have to run fast and get out of there, I don't think that you want to be doing that with an asthma affliction where you all of a sudden cannot breathe. And then, of course, this leads to panic and anxiety and the fallout. And then how many people are you taking off of the task at hand to help facilitate the person who maybe was not appropriately placed in that position in the first place? So this, again, seems like a policy implementation that has not been well thought out. But I would, similarly to you, Sheila, like to hear from military members or former serving, upcoming, what they think on this topic, because we are outsiders looking in. So maybe we're not getting the full scope of what's going on here, but seems like a recipe for disaster to me.
Yeah, I'm not sure. And to bolster my suspicions that this is not about like inclusivity in different places within the military, but more DEI nonsense, is this statement. It's a 3-minute clip. I'm not sure we need to show it all, but they are expanding its recruitment to streamline the acceptance of immigrants. Okay. You know what? If immigrants want to serve their host country, I'm actually not against that. But then they go on to use the language of the left here, racialized Canadians, whatever that means. It sounds like it's something we did to them as opposed to just their ethnic background. Women and those with, quote, low risk medical conditions. So maybe we'll show that.
Focus is transformation and mobilization are the two key words that I use to describe the approach that we have at the moment. Of course, modernization means more than just changing how we recruit, but it also means changing who we recruit.
With support from the Vice Chief of Defense Staff and government partners, we are challenging outdated policies and practices to simplify security process for applicants with ties to other countries. Therefore, most applicants, included permanent resident, can begin basic training after receiving their reliability status clearance. Just recently, we have enrolled our 455th permanent resident, so great success. To build on how we recruit and ensuring that we don't unnecessarily screen good candidates out, we are modernizing our medical standard by reviewing our military common medical standards and aligning them with our new universality of service policy. This will give us more flexibility to recognize that people with low risk medical condition may still serve fully in the Canadian Armed Forces. Right now, 26.4% of newly enrolled Canadian Armed Forces members identify as racialized Canadians. 18% are women, and 5.2% identify as Indigenous. To succeed, we must continue to tap on all Canadians from all communities who want to serve.
Candidates without high-risk foreign implications now complete an initial reliability status check before enrollment. That is to say, they are now enrolled under the same process as Canadian citizens who do not possess high-risk foreign implications. We've analyzed our processes and realized that the Canadian Forces Aptitude Test was not in line with industry best practices and served as a barrier to enrollment. Instead, we've introduced a Scored Employment Application Form, or SEAF, which evaluates essential qualities of personal and organizational success, including academic results, qualifications, work experience, extracurricular activities, or other life achievements.
With the modernized common enrollment medical standard, we are adding a third group, fit to the task, which means that while the applicant has medical...
This is so absurd to me, whereas you could just say, hey, we're hiring back all of the people we fired over their vaccine, COVID-19 vaccine refusal, and we're going to give them back, maybe not even give them back pay, but we could just hire them all back, do away with that ridiculous mandate, because we know so much more about these injections. And I know we have to be a bit safe here, what we say on YouTube. So I'm sure a lot of our viewers already know some of the reporting that we've done in that way, but we know so much more about these injections now. It doesn't make sense to continue mandating them and compelling people to receive them with holding the carrot of their employment over their face to do so. Instead of just doing that, saying, hey, we're done with the mandate, come back, please. We'll maybe give you some sort of incentive to do that because you surely have bad blood now as a result of the despicable treatment you've received over the last few years by our government and your employer. But instead, we're putting making all of these changes, replacing an aptitude test with a scored information form. I mean, what does that even mean? What kind of threshold are we striving for here? Because it seems like we're just not even setting the bar low. We're doing away with it altogether.
Yeah, I noticed that the one lady said to be fully participating in the military. So it's not like this is, inclusivity, including people who really truly want to join the military, but are unable to for whatever reason. This is like fully operational deployment ready kind of people that we're lowering the standards for. And this is quite chilling, actually. We've got a chat on this topic, actually. So let's hit the chat, and then we've got a quick ad read, and then we'll go into some other stories, including I think it's David Menzies was out working this morning, went to a Pierre Poilievre press conference, and then we've got some news from SPVM. So we've got, this is from Nissa Yeadon, gives us $5. Well, thank you so much. And they say, I was denied military service due to antidepressants. And now we've got tampons in the men's room and pride flags on the crosswalks. Yeah. Yeah.
And maybe you could reapply, because apparently anyone with an anxiety disorder, asthma, or autism can apply. And it will be based on you'll have to answer some questions about your education. And you don't have to do an aptitude test anymore. So...
And
welcome.
Like this nonsense of prioritizing certain people, racialized Canadians and sexual minorities in the queue for recruitment has been going on for a long time. It became evident to everybody involved that if you wanted to, and this I know secondhand from the young man I mentioned earlier, if he had answered that he were gay, they would have taken him sooner than they did. So as if that makes a difference to his fitness for duty, right? Like he's out there training every day, running with a weighted backpack. But if he were gay, they would have taken him quicker. So
it's ridiculous. I remember a friend of mine in high school, he was an American, and he couldn't apply to the military because he had flat feet. Like, that's how stringent and strict the requirements were at that time, right? That's going back almost 20 years. And he wanted desperately to serve. And because he had flat feet, he could not. And now we're just, anyone here, welcome, come on in. It's
come on in.
to see how that has degraded over the last several years, but I mean, drawing on even 20 years ago, that is a shocking to see.
Oh, hi, it's Ezra Levant here in Toronto with an important message because we need your help. Independent journalism in Canada is under attack. Government censors, big tech deplatformers, and the dying legacy media are all working together to maintain exclusive control on the information you receive. They don't want you to hear other voices like ours, and they really don't want you to be informed and to think for yourself. That's why the work we do here at Rebel News is so important. Our on-the-ground reporting, independent news shows, and special content you won't find anywhere else. It's all designed to give you trustworthy information and alternative viewpoints so you can decide for yourself. We don't get government money, and we are not owned by some big global conglomerate. We're funded by people just like you, so please support independent journalism and help us continue our work by subscribing and becoming a Rebel News Plus member today, right here on the page. Go to rebelnewsplus.com.